Hey everyone, thanks for joining us at this webinar. We are waiting for a few more people to arrive. In the meantime, if you want to share in the chat where you're joining us from, that would be super fun. So it looks like we have about 40 participants, but the numbers are rising, 48, 47. Okay, don't be shy. Come on, someone. Tell us where you're joining us from. And we will get started in about 2 minutes.
I think we had someone saying in the Q&A part. Okay, now they started sharing. The chat is disabled.
Okay, is it, that would be a problem if the chat is disabled. Is it working now?
It's working for me. I tested it, but I don't know. It's working for everybody else.
I don't know. No one's.
I think for us, we can chat among like hosts and panelists, but not with the public.
Okay, so it says chat is disabled. Okay. Nico, can you open the chat so everyone? But we have, let's see. Yeah, chat is disabled. Okay, well, if chat doesn't get fixed, we can still move forward. Anyhow, folks, thank you so much for joining us. Okay, hopefully we'll get the chat enabled in a second. But in the meantime, as we go, as we're doing this webinar, if you have questions that arise, please add them to the Q&A. So let's look at our agenda for today. But first, this is our SpaceAG Conversations. This is the first of a series, which we'll discuss in a second, but space farming, how can we benefit from it? My name is David Souza, and I'm going to be your host for today. And we have two amazing guests, who I will introduce shortly. But just to go over quickly the agenda for today. First of all, I'm going to be introducing a new series that we're launching, and this is the first portion of the series. Then we'll have two amazing presentations by our wonderful guest speakers. We'll have then a Q&A session. So as your questions come up during the presentations, please add them to the Q&A. And then we'll have some closing remarks. So first, as I mentioned before, we're launching a SpaceAG series, which is going to be just a series of conversations with SpaceAG experts, like the ones that we have with us today. In addition, we'll be alternating these conversations with SpaceAG experts with just kind of update sessions. So sessions where the co-hosts here, Davi and I, will be discussing things related to SpaceAG that are happening in the news. And these will be conversations that everyone can join and ask questions, and we'll discussion. So it'll be kind of a laid back hangout session where SpaceAG can be just enjoy your coffee and discuss SpaceAG, because we know there's a lot of folks who are interested in SpaceAG, and we want to create a forum where folks can have that discussion. Now, our calendar for next year. So today's the first SpaceAG event, and then we will have 7 more events throughout 2025. They'll be happening approximately every month and a half or so. And they have not been scheduled yet, but as we get firm dates for each event, we will let you know, and we will be publicizing these on LinkedIn, through Instagram, and through all our social media channels. If any of you out in the audience have certain experts, SpaceAG experts, who you would like to see participate as part of our SpaceAG series, please let us know. We would appreciate, we have some ideas of who we want to bring on for some of the conversations, but we would always love to have your feedback and your ideas. So before we start our roundtable, can we do our first poll, Nico, and to tell us what industry folks are from? So we want to understand, folks, what is your field of interest? Are you coming to this webinar from an agricultural background? Are you coming more from the space tech side? Are you a researcher? Are you in education, or from a sustainability environment? So we'll leave this poll open for about a minute, and then hopefully we will see we'll get the results. Okay, so let's close this poll and see what the results are. Okay, so thanks everyone for participating. Looks like we have everyone answered, so thank you. So we have folks from multiple areas, but the largest is agriculture farming, 64%. And then research education, about 50% of you, and space tech and sustainability, 40%. Okay, thank you so much. All right, let us move on. Okay, so now I would like to introduce our 2 speakers. And so we have our Davi Souza he'll be a speaker today and our co-host. He'll be speaking a little later on. We'll do a larger introduction there, but Davi, welcome. And thank you for being the co-host for this series.
Thank you very much. Hi everyone, it's a pleasure to be here. Looking forward to the presentations today.
Awesome. And then our first speaker is Rebeca Gonçalves. She is a Brazilian astrobiologist and specialist in space agriculture. She graduated in biology from the University of Bristol in England, and with a master's in astrobiology from Wageningen University in the Netherlands. Now, I was blown away because I didn't even know you could study astrobiology. What an amazing thing to study. She has worked at the European Space Agency in the communications sector for commercial space missions aboard the International Space Station. She has also organized an extensive program on space studies in partnership with the International Space University and NASA. She has participated as a speaker at the NASA Space Apps Challenge in Brazil, and she is a science communicator through her Instagram account with more than 16,000 followers. So everyone please follow her, and gives lectures on space science to young people throughout Brazil. Currently, she is an astrobiologist consultant for the space agricultural projects for the Brazilian Space Agency. So welcome very much, Rebeca. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, David. It's a pleasure for me to be here with you guys and to speak with you all. I'm going to share my presentation. Let's see. You see my screen? Let me put it in full screen, then you can give me the feedback if it's working.
Yeah, we can see it.
Yeah, perfect. All right. All right. Screenshot for memory. So I'm going to talk to you about, I'm going to give you a brief overview of space agriculture because there's so much to share. It's such an exciting new topic of research that we're living now. It's being researched actually since the 1960s. We started research space agriculture. And more over the years, more and more we've been researching it, and now it's a very promising area that is meant to only grow from now on as we explore the moon, as we explore Mars and beyond Mars as well. And I'm also going to talk to you about a little bit about the benefits of space agriculture for Earth. So to start with a little overview. First of all, I want to bring the Artemis Accords because NASA has the Artemis program. So we all remember the Apollo program back in the 1960s and 70s. Apollo 11 was the first one to bring men to the moon. And but back in the Apollo era, our objectives, our goals with our missions was to bring men to the moon, humans to the moon, to explore the moon and then come back with samples. And today, Artemis is the sister program of the Apollo program. It has Artemis actually in the Greek mythology is Apollo's twin sister. And it's named after a woman because it's going to bring the first woman to the moon as well. So the Artemis program now is a program of moon exploration where we are now going to the moon to stay. So the point of this next phase of moon exploration is to build bases on the moon so that we can stay on the moon. And that's where space agriculture comes in, because if we're staying on the moon, then we're going to need to produce food there. And then so that we can learn a lot, and then from there we can go on to Mars. So NASA has put together the Artemis Accords, which is a series of agreements between now 47 nations. And these agreements include things like transparency of research and data, technology transfer between the countries and the space agencies, also things like compatibility of all the technologies that we bring there. So for example, using like the same plug to plug the different utensils that we have so that we can share technology when we are on the moon between all these space agencies. So it's a really cool accord, and Brazil is part of it. So there it is, Brazil there. And as part of the Artemis Accords and the Artemis program, Brazil has committed itself to research in depth about the space agriculture, because Brazil has already huge advancements in earth agriculture, and we have a lot of like high-end technology and institutions here in Brazil that work a lot and in very much depth with earth agriculture. And now, so we have committed to bring to space the technologies that we use here on Earth. So the Brazilian Space Agency, AEB, has put together a network called Space Farming Brazil. And this network, it brings together the 30 top scientists of Brazil that work with earth agriculture. And these 30 top scientists are now developing the technologies for lunar agriculture. And I'm a consultant to this group of 30 top scientists that belong to this network, Space Farming Brazil. All right, why develop space agriculture? I'll put the first one there. Mainly because we want to produce fresh food there. Fresh food means better nutrition, because if we have a little example here, this is astronaut food, right? This is the thing that we can buy at NASA. But this is not how the food is brought to the ISS nowadays. This is how the food is packaged. So it's dehydrated. This is chocolate ice cream. So the food is nowadays dehydrated and then put it in little packages like this and then sent to the ISS. However, if we wanna have a base on the moon, we're gonna need more than these boring packages. We're gonna need fresh food. And we need fresh food mainly because in the process of dehydration of food, we actually lose a lot of the essential nutrients that we have in fresh food, especially antioxidants. So antioxidants are the main nutrient that is lost during dehydration, and antioxidants are also the main nutrient responsible for radiation protection. So they're very good to protect against radiation and against damages by ROS, reactive oxygen species. So that's one factor. That's one reason why producing fresh food on the moon matters, and on Mars as well. And the other factor is psychological benefits that the life plans bring to the astronauts. So every astronaut I've encountered, talked with a lot of astronauts, and they all tell me the same thing, that the thing that they miss the most when they're on the ISS is nature. And that really has a huge impact on their mental well-being. So giving the opportunity for the astronauts to work with plants, to take care of plants, can also bring a huge mental benefit, psychological benefit for them. And we can never underestimate mental health, which is very important, especially in isolated environments like we're going to have on the base, on Moon base and Mars base. And the second point is that space agriculture builds towards colony independence. So imagine that we're living on Mars and we have all the food that we need for a 2-year mission on Mars in a rocket, and then we're bringing it to Mars, and then this rocket explodes on launch, or the spaceship, something happens to the spaceship on the 7-month travel, or something happens when it's landing on Mars. So we cannot depend, for the sake of the security of the astronauts on the colonies, we must not depend on resources being brought from Earth, especially food, because food is very, very, very important. So cultivating fresh food on the lunar base and on the Mars base is of extreme importance to build towards this independence, and hence the security of the astronauts, and hence the viability of the mission, both in financial terms and also in practical terms. And finally, we have, of course, the technology transfer benefits. So I'm gonna focus on this in a few slides, but I just want to put here that this, one of the reasons that we do research with space agriculture is so that this technology can be transferred to Earth. So in space research, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the space sector, but within the space sector, every scientist, every piece of research must always bring some benefit to Earth. So it's unacceptable that a space-related research doesn't bring benefits to Earth. So this is always a priority, and it's always on the top of the mind of every space researcher. Where are we going to grow food in space? So there's three places that we need to grow this food. The first place is orbital stations, so like the ISS or Lunar Gateway. Lunar Gateway is going to be the new home of the astronauts. It's going to orbit the moon, so it's like an ISS, an International Space Station, that orbits the moon, and that's where the astronauts are going to live. So we're going to have to produce food there. Then a second place is spaceships for long distance travel, for example, from here to Mars. And a third place is, of course, planetary surfaces like Moon, like Mars, and also like asteroids. So when the time comes for asteroid mining, and that time is not very far away, that's where we're gonna have to also produce food for the miners, space miners. Space agriculture, of course, brings its challenges. So there are several challenges. I'm gonna show to you some of these challenges. So the first one is, of course, microgravity and partial gravity on planetary surfaces. So on the moon, we have 1/6 of the gravity of Earth, and on the Mars, we have 1/3 of the gravity of Earth. So we have partial gravity there. and that can bring problems to plant growth. Microgravity certainly does. It brings indirect problems. So like in the absence of gravity, water doesn't actually diffuse properly. So it stays in concentrated points of the root, and because it does that, it first of all, it suffocates the root where it is, and also doesn't give water to the whole root. So that's an indirect problem of microgravity that we have to solve. Of course, space radiation is a major issue that causes damage to both plants and humans. Lack of atmosphere on Moon, 0 atmosphere. On Mars, 1% of the atmosphere of Earth. So the plants wouldn't be able to do photosynthesis just using, by just being there on the surface of Mars. There's not enough carbon dioxide. So that's another challenge to overcome. A lack of magnetic field also is related to a lack of atmosphere. And last of all, a lack of nutrients in loco. So we don't have the Martian soil and the lunar soil. They don't really have all the nutrients necessary for plant growth. And so that's another challenge that we need to overcome. But for the good news is that for each of these challenges, we have been researching solutions. So for the lack of microgravity, we have ventilation. So we can produce continuous ventilation that can dissipate these water molecules or even the gases that get stuck in these particular points on the roots of the plants. For space radiation, we can build greenhouses that are either covered by soil or underneath the Earth of Moon Mars. And Mars has these huge lava tubes, which are tunnels left behind by volcano eruptions. And we're thinking of building our colonies inside these tubes. So that we're protected against the radiation. For lack of atmosphere, we can pump in the gases that are present on Mars. So there are some gases present, and especially carbon dioxide, actually. So we can pump it in, or we can also recycle the gases. We can bring some oxygen with us, and then we can recycle it with the plants that we grow inside the colony. For a lack of magnetic field, we can actually generate a local magnetic field using minerals. And for lack of nutrients, we can create a circular agricultural system. So, for example, the non-edible parts of the plants of one generation can be composted and become the nutrients of the next generation. So that's actually a big area of study nowadays. And here, the platforms for space agriculture. So because we're producing so much research, we are producing this research in specific platforms. So the first platform is orbital stations. So aboard the ISS or also on Tiangong, that's the Chinese space station, we have fixed mini platforms, mini greenhouses there where plant experiments have been going up. And this happens nowadays. Today, there's a plant experiment happening in space. We have satellites, and these can be either from CubeSats to large satellites. So CubeSats have gone up to space with plant experiments inside, as well as large satellites that have more complex experiments inside them, like this one. This one, as you can see, we have some algae here, and we have some fish. So this is a kind of like a mini circular system where the algae gives the nutrients for the fish, and the fish feed on the oxygen created by the algae. And for the regolith, for the planetary services regolith is the technical name for Martian soil and for lunar soil. We actually call Martian regolith and lunar regolith. And regolith just means that it's a soil that has no nutrient content in it. So it's basically just grinded rock. And that's what we call it. I'm going to call it regolith from now on. So lunar and Martian regolith. We have some lunar regolith here on Earth from the Apollo samples that we've brought over 300 kilos of lunar dust and rocks to Earth, and we use that to replicate, and then we use this data that we have, and then we replicate it, and then we create a lunar regolith simulant, it's called, which is identical to the Rio regolith, and for Mars is the same thing. We have the rovers on the surface of Mars doing all the soil research, and then we can get this data and replicate a Martian regolith simulant that is exactly the same as the Martian soil, as the Martian regolith. And we also use hydroponics to study space agriculture. Hydroponics is actually a huge part of space agriculture, and it's a huge candidate for growing crops in space. This is my research, so I'm gonna give you a brief overview of what I did, and then when it's time for us to have our coffee and chat, you can ask more if you're interested. So I researched, I worked with Martian agriculture. I researched how to optimize the resources in a Martian environment. So my research was intercropping on Mars. Intercropping is an ancient system. Actually, it was created by the Mayans. I didn't invent it. It was created by the Mayans. It's used by people on Earth, but I was the first researcher in the world to apply this method to a space agriculture environment. So that's why this research made a lot of noise in the media. It was picked up by a lot of media, and we had a huge public reach, which is really cool. And we discovered some really interesting things. So this is the experiment. We had Martian soil. It was also the biggest experiment to date in terms of the depth of the pots that we used. So we used 100 kilos of Martian regolith, and this Martian regolith is like super expensive because it comes directly from NASA. We used 100 kilos of it, and we used 5-liter pots. And until then, the biggest pots were like tiny ones that are like 500 milliliters. So we had difficulties with the challenges with this experiment that actually hadn't even been discovered yet. So we pointed out new challenges for the space community and proposed how to solve them. And we also had control soil. So we had sand and organic soil as control to see how they would compare. This is what we grew: tomatoes, peas, and carrots. And if you look at these pictures, you can see that they grew very successfully. So we grew very successfully Martian tomatoes, Martian peas, and Martian carrots. And the plants grew very well. But our actual research question was the research question was, can they, if they are planted together in the same pot, can they actually help each other grow better and optimize the resources there in the agricultural system? So we had our setup is that we had one pot that had all the 3 species planted in it. So we had one pot with one plant of tomato, one plant of pea, one plant of carrot. And then we had other pots that had just tomatoes or just peas and just carrots. And then we compared the results, and these are the results. So here's we're comparing the tomatoes that were grown together with the peas and the carrots. You see there's a tomato plant here, and there's some peas, and there's some tiny carrots down here, compared to a pot with just tomatoes. So there's just 3 tomato plants here. And as you can see, usually I open this question to see so that we can all spot the difference together. But here, in the interest of time, I'm going to point it out to you. So you can see that the tomatoes grown in the intercropped condition, they grew a lot better than the tomatoes planted in the monocropped condition. So you can see that the tomatoes here, the intercropped Martian tomatoes, they are bigger, they matured earlier, so they're red. Compared to these ones that haven't even matured yet. The stem is thicker compared to this. The plant is larger. It has more side stems. So it produced actually double the yield compared to the monocropped tomatoes. So our big find was that yes, intercropping can help optimize the resources in a Martian colony, because tomatoes plant in the intercropped condition actually yielded double compared to the monocropped condition. And this worked really well for tomatoes. However, it didn't work so well for carrots. For the peas, we had no difference in the results, but for carrots, as you can see, these are the intercropped carrots and these are the monocropped carrots. And you can see as the monocropped carrots grew a lot more and they were a lot bigger. Although when we compare the Martian carrot to the Earth carrot, you can see that the Martian carrot has a very dwarf characteristic. And this actually, because this is one of the other findings of our experiment, we discovered that the Martian regolith becomes super compact when it's wet. It actually becomes like a block of clay, super compact. And this interferes with the growth of the roots and especially carrots. So they have a hard time growing downwards. And that's why they're so short. So amending the Martian regolith with some sort of compost or organic material will be necessary for optimal growth of root vegetables like carrots or potatoes. So now I'm going to talk a little, just to finalize the technology transfers from space agriculture to earth agriculture. So first of all, we have soil regeneration. And I brought this one first because this is actually what my research also tends towards. So because the Martian regolith and the lunar regolith, they are so poor in nutrients and also in physical characteristics and chemical characteristics. They're very poor in all senses. They're very infertile. All the technology that we develop to regenerate these soils can be immediately applied to regenerate soils, degraded soils on Earth as well. And nowadays, we actually have a huge problem with degraded soils on Earth, where over 40% of Earth's fertile soils are already degraded, either by climate change or by human action, like monoculture in cereal monoculture. So soil regeneration is a big part of what we can do with the technology that we develop for space agriculture, because if you can turn Martian regolith into fertile Martian soil, then we can definitely regenerate the soils of Earth as well. Second is the self-sustainability of the bioregenerative system. So a bioregenerative system means that it's an agricultural system where it's totally self-sustainable, self-sufficient, and closed. It's a closed system. And imagine if we can develop these systems for Earth, for Moon bases or for Mars bases, we can also put them in local communities, or we can put them in urban areas. And this is a really cool thing to do, because if we just take the urban area in itself, we lose between 15 and 30% of food during transportation. So already we save up to 30% of food by growing our food in urban areas using space technology. And also the food transportation, the CO2 emitted contributes to 6% of the global CO2 emissions of Earth, and that's higher than all the aviation, the commercial aviation, which is 4%. So the footprint of food transportation is very, very high. And if we produce food in urban areas, again, then we can save on all this carbon footprint. And finally, we can produce better cultivars and better agricultural systems, because all the cultivars that we will produce for space research, they will have to be highly nutritious, highly productive, highly efficient, highly resistant to diseases, and etc. So we're going to end up producing really good cultivars, which can be directly transferred to Earth as well. And also the agricultural system itself has to be efficient. It has to be autonomous. It has to use less water. So it has to be water efficient and energy efficient. And all these efficiencies that we're going to tweak to produce a highly efficient agricultural system for space can, of course, be directly given to Earth as well. And these are just some examples. I could actually go on for an hour just talking about the technology transfers of space agriculture to Earth agriculture. It's a big thing, and it's a thing that we always have really in our highest priority to produce results that are also beneficial to Earth. So that's why we have so many benefits. So for me, this is it. Thank you. This is my Instagram. You can follow me there. I post a lot of things about Mars agriculture and also space agriculture, and other space-related facts as well. And any questions, you can send me a direct message here on Instagram, or you can send me an email as well. Thank you very much, guys.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Rebecca. And there was just one question. It was real Martian regolith that you were using in your trial, or simulated Martian regolith?
It was a simulant, because we haven't yet brought Martian regolith from Mars yet. So all that we know about Martian regolith comes from our rovers that are on Mars, and they are studying the soil and they are giving us the data. And then with this data, what NASA does, they go inside a volcano in Hawaii, and then they take the soil from inside this volcano, and then they manipulate it. So they add chemical elements, they remove chemical elements, so that in the end, it's an almost perfect match, 99% match to the real Martian regolith. And it's super faithful to the real one. So whatever we can grow with the simulant, we can definitely grow on Mars as well.
Gotcha. Okay, that's super interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so amazing presentation. Thank you so much. Now we will have another presentation. This is from Davi Souza. Davi is a greenhouse specialist, ag tech and space farming researcher, and consultant with over 6 years of technical expertise and experience in CEA sector, controlled environment agriculture. He is pursuing an electrical engineering degree in Brazil. Along with his career, Davi started his journey as a researcher and analog astronaut at the first space analog station in South America called Habitat Marte. This has led him to become an intern at Pink Farms, Brazil's first vertical and urban farm. What else? Davi has done a bunch of other things. He's been a visiting student at King Abdullah University of Science and Technology, KAUST in Saudi Arabia, to research advanced technologies for desert greenhouses. And Davi has led the development of Space Farming 101 in conjunction with Agritecture, our company, which is the first online course in space agriculture. So thank you, Davi. Please go ahead with your presentation.
Thank you, David. So, hi, everyone. Great pleasure to be here to start this series of conversations, and also having Rebecca with us, sharing a lot of opportunities and about her experience in space farming. Well, Rebecca is an astrobiologist, so I will bring here more an engineering perspective of space farming to you all. So my presentation will be discussing on technological platforms for space and terrestrial farming. So moving on the presentation, just very quick here, just to complement what David said. I'm a greenhouse specialist. My background is in electrical engineering. I have been doing some research with space farming and controlled environment agriculture. Everything started with my first prototype of a smart greenhouse when I was doing my technician course. As you can see on the left figure, this led me to many great opportunities, such as becoming an analog astronaut in Habitat Marte, going to pink farms, cows, researching on desert agriculture, and nowadays I am officially a science communicator in a research center located here in Brazil, which is called GCCRC, or Genomic for Climate Change Research Center. As you can see on the right figure, I'm sharing a lot of the technological solutions that they are utilizing on their research. So it has been a really cool journey. And also feel free to reach out if you want to contact me, my Instagram, LinkedIn. Well, moving to the presentation, I will be very brief in this thing here, as Rebecca presented. Basically, we need space farming to support life in space. We have astronauts, and with that, we need to have in situ food production. Rebecca mentioned really well, like some of the constraints of having dehydrated food and so on. So we need to produce fresh and local food to reduce some of logistical and nutritional issues that might have in space missions. Well, also the mental well-being, which is another issue in space, especially if we are dealing with isolated, confined in an extreme environment. So having plants, it's a really cool idea for the astronauts to chill and see having a green color in the like all dark or gray environment of the International Space Station or future space habitat. On the other hand, we also have a very hot topic, which is the new space sector. We are having a lot of private companies working in the field of space exploration itself, but of course, if we are aiming to have some commercial space habitats or orbital station, the companies need also to grow crops, especially if they are aiming to do some space tourism. And this figure here is just one example of the orbital reef, orbital station. This is a project by Blue Origin, and it's super cool because they are partnering with space companies called SpaceAG Space to also develop the food production systems there. And finally, the sustainable space exploration for long-term missions. Now, some of the research that we are having now in space, they have the aim to understand how to grow fresh food and also how to use plants to process air and water. And this will be very critical to support human life in space. At the International Space Station, right now above us, we have some platforms that are being utilized for this type of research. From left to right, we have Veggie, which is simply a space garden. It has some, of course, some solutions to deal with microgravity and other issues of the space environment. But basically, this is a garden that allows the astronauts to grow crop and also to feed themselves with this crop. On the other hand, we have the Advanced Plant Habitat, or APH, which is a high-tech system, a lot of sensors, high tech capabilities, and basically this is utilized for plant physiological research in space. And also more recently, the company SpaceAG Space, which I mentioned before, they send the system called X-Roots with the aim to validate their aeroponic system in microgravity, as you can see on the figure. So these are some of the current platforms that they are utilizing right now. Of course, this is just the example of the International Space Station, but also I didn't put it here, but the Chinese space station, they have their own system and they are doing very cool research in the field too. So what these studies of the ISS and the ISS can teach us? Basically, in a very short response, we need to understand how to grow and how the plants respond in space conditions with increased radiation levels and also microgravity and other constraints of the space environment, either edible and not edible crops. This is on the right figure, you can see a brief list of crops that was grown in space, and the astronaut ate these crops there. On the other hand, we have the aim to advance the knowledge on efficient, reliable plant cultivation systems, as Rebecca mentioned, for these long-term missions. Well, I wanted to bring here some ideas on the technology validation. Of course, this is a step-by-step process along the years, but we also need to think what next. So until now, we had a lot of capabilities of knowledge that both veggie and advanced plant habitat allowed us to have. And NASA is currently working on a system called Halo 3. This will be the first operational crop production system in space. But if you ask me, don't we have veggie in advanced plant habitat to do this? So basically, both of these systems, they were developed to conduct research. But now they are planning to understand, they are aiming to understand how a food production system perform in the space environment, like how the astronauts will manipulate the system, will handle, how will be the management, and so on. So this is more like, imagine have a small chamber or a small growth tent in your house, and you are growing your crops by your own, without sending back to Earth for scientific analysis. analysis. So, and this Halo 3 will be the system that they are planning to send to the International Space Station by 2026, and after that, going to the Lunar Gateway. Other projects made by, which is being held by some private companies. The first one is the Leaf Beta mission or Leaf Beta payload. They are planning to grow some different types of crops and microgreens, utilizing a small chamber on the moon, and this will be a payload that will be sent during the Artemis 3 lunar mission. And on the right figure, very right figure, you can see very recently, a recent announced mission, which is called the Mission Little Prince by the company Interstellar Lab. And they are aiming to grow roses utilizing the lunar soil, lunar regolith, and of course, like sending this to the moon and see how the systems will perform. Well, we also have some other platforms, which are the space analogs, and with the aim of having some terrestrial demonstrations of the technology. Basically, we need to learn how to efficiently grow the crops in extreme conditions, such as space, but also we have extreme conditions here on Earth, such as Antarctica region, the Antarctica continent, which has very low temperatures. On the other hand, we have deserts with very high temperatures, and also in Brazil, we have a semi-arid region that we face not only high temperatures, but we have severe droughts here. Well, and I bring here some examples just for you to have an idea. From left to right, we have the Eden ISS, which was a container farm that operated in Antarctica for almost 6 years by the German Space Agency. Now they bring back this container to Germany to do the re-engineering process and thinking on how to implement this system in the months very soon, hopefully. On the other hand, we have Pragmate. This was the greenhouse that I was able to develop in collaboration with other researchers there, which allowed us to implement aquaponics system to grow crops, to feed ourselves during the analog missions, during the space analog simulations, there in the semi-arid region of Brazil in the northeast, in Brazil northeast. And on the right, we have a very recent system called Hot Space, which was utilized during the AMA-D 18 mission, if I'm not wrong, in Albania desert. I might be wrong with the location itself, but well, anyway, they were able to build this platform for food production, specifically growing microgreens to feed the astronauts during the simulation missions. And all of this is a kind of an incubator of solutions, not only to understand how to grow crops in future space habitats, but also to advance agriculture on Earth. As you can see, we have this type of solutions being implemented here on Earth. And with that, some of the applications of space farming, let me tell you that this is not as rocket science as we think. It's not like building a rocket. Space farming is an interactive process of design, building, and test with continuous improvement engineering. And I bring the figure on the left just for you to have an idea. As Rebecca mentioned, everything started like during the 60s, but I wanted, on the technological perspective, the left figure showed this VET greenhouse, which was the first full automated greenhouse with sensors that was sent to space around the 90s at the Mir space station. And now we have the advanced plant habitat. So a lot of things happen during this step-by-step process that allowed us to reach this full capabilities that we have right now, and of course that we are still developing and even further. And on the right is just like for you to have an idea on how things happen in this space exploration context when we have an idea that comes from the lab, and this become a flight model that will be sent to space, and everything is based on the improvement of technology readiness level, or TRL. As you can see, there are some process and some steps that are necessary to reach, and like some scientific instruments that will be sent to space. So, as Rebecca mentioned, also we have the space technology transfer, or the space spin-offs, and this is an opportunity to support and advance terrestrial farming systems with modern farming as we have right now, towards sustainable development and also reducing the impacts of climate change. And I really like this figure. That's why I put it here, because we have a lot of similarities with both terrestrial and space agriculture. And sometimes we do not look in this way. We think that space farming is too distant and from our daily lives. But it's closer than we can imagine. And as we all know, we are now looking with modern farming, we are now looking on how to design sustainable and efficient farming systems to increase yield with minimized use of space and resources. And all of these started to become even more possible, even more useful when they started talking about the CEA sector, the controlled environment agriculture capabilities, utilizing artificial lighting. And I bring here some examples for you. Vertical farms, the indoor agriculture with container farms, and also smart greenhouses. And I also must mention that controlled environment agriculture, and especially the use of LEDs on agriculture, was something that came from the space farming research. NASA started doing this long time ago, and now we are utilizing this type of the technology that was transferred back to Earth. Let's say like that. Let's say like this. And to conclude my presentation here, I had the opportunity to present this figure recently during the third annual Space Ecology Workshop, which is a very cool event during 2 days, reuniting many specialists involved in the field of space ecology, space farming, to discuss, present the research, and also to promote collaborations. And I had the opportunity to discuss exactly the collaborative efforts to advance terrestrial and space farming. And as you can see in this, let's say in this diagram, we have the space farming research as I presented to you with the space analogs, TRL, International Space Station, and this is all ways to demonstrate solutions for the continuous improvement of this space ecosystem technology. But also we can add the modern terrestrial farming system to integrate and to transfer back these technologies from space. To and from space. And I showed these figures here in the middle for you, just like from left to right, we have the Eden ISS, as I presented to you, an operational greenhouse in Antarctica. In the middle is a biofarm concept by Interstellar Lab, also a space company that they are developing systems to grow some herbs on Earth. And on the right one is a concept made by NASA of a future Martian greenhouse. So they have a lot of similarities, and we should also look with these eyes to these opportunities. And all of these will lead us to implement some controlled closed ecological life support systems that will lead us to the refinement and continuous improvement to reach the desired bioregenerative life support systems, as Rebecca mentioned. So thank you very much. And now we can move to the Q&A.
Thank you, Davi. That was a great, amazing presentation. So let's jump into our Q&A quickly. I know we have some questions. So there were a couple of questions for you, Rebecca, about during your trials, modification of like CO2 levels and the photo period during your experiment. Can you talk a little bit about what you did for both of those?
Yes, that's a good question. That's an excellent question, because of course, as I said, we are going to grow food inside big greenhouses on Mars and Moon. So to actually, many people say, how did you simulate the Martian atmosphere, the Martian environment? And actually, it's a little bit of the other way around, because on Mars, we're going to simulate Earth. So actually on Earth, it's just simulating the Martian conditions is basically having a greenhouse where everything is controlled as it's going to be on Mars. So we grew our crops inside a controlled greenhouse where you controlled CO2 and oxygen, temperature, humidity, and the lighting as well. So we had a photo period of 12 on, 12 off, and all the other gases and temperature and humidity were also controlled, and we have the data of all those. So yes, that's how we controlled our experiment.
Okay, thank you for that. Um, there was also a question about, was there any um, sort of like biology added to the Martian regolith simulant, any manure, any biology, anything like that to um, yeah, add organic matter, et cetera, et cetera. So
Yeah, also good question. Yes, but only the bare minimum we added, because really we wanted to research how these three species would fend together. And our theory, our hypothesis was that the pea was going to be able to provide most of the nitrogen in the soil, because pea has this symbiotic relationship with a bacteria in the soil called rhizobia, which we also added into the soil. And this rhizobia is able to do nitrogen fixing, so it's able to turn the nitrogen into the atmosphere into nitrogen in the soil that the plant can use. So we added the bare minimum of nutrients. It was 100 mil per week, which is very, very little in agricultural standards. And even so, the plants grew very well.
okay, thank you. Um, I know that we are short on time, so I'm hoping both of our guests can potentially stay an extra 5 or 10 minutes if possible. That would be amazing, so we can keep answering some of these questions. Um, and both of them nodded, so I assume that's positive. So great. Um, there were some questions about gravity and yeah, simulation software for gravity, or how do you sort of like model the gravity conditions? Maybe both of you can answer, talk about this, about how gravity is treated in space cultivation.
I'll just say that we did not simulate gravity in our experiment, but Davi, you can tell how we do simulate gravity in other experiments. You can tell about this technology.
Sure, sure. Well, we have some few platforms that allow us to, let's say, simulate gravity in advance. Of course, they are not like as like the same with the same reliability of like the same fidelity of putting a system in microgravity on the International Space Station. But we have the clinostats, which are basically like a three-axis rotating system, like very randomly, and you are like imagine like that you are flowing around, you are putting your plants to flowing around, and this is like one way to make this to kind of simulate having like some reactions of the plants being low weight environment, like with like similar to a microgravity environment. Other things we have some. I might not remember exactly term. Rebecca, you can correct me if I say wrong, but it's basically a tower that you just like let the thing to like a fall, and you can
It's called
for
drop tower.
yes. So for a few minutes of like for a few minutes or even less, I think you can have like a minimum simulation of like microgravity 2, and the same is doing like in some parabolic flights. So you have the airplane that they goes very up and they do like some, let's say, acrobatic movements, like some acrobatic moves that you can experience the weightless conditions. So some experiments that they cannot be sent to the International Space Station, they like some researchers, they are looking to these platforms, to utilize this platform if they are aiming to evaluate the microgravity conditions, because sometimes you are looking to evaluate some, for example, Rebecca wanted to evaluate the performance of the intercropping. So of course microgravity would be like one more
Yeah,
variable.
variation.
So this sometimes might be tricky. So if you are just interested in looking at the microgravity, these are some of the platforms.
Okay. Now we're talking about, food for astronauts, and an important question is, do astronauts eat more or less when they're in space than on Earth?
Davi, you want to take it?
Yes. Well, this was really cool because, like, previous than the webinar, I saw one news that was shared recently with regarding the astronauts that got stuck in space by Boeing. Like, they were planning to return like maybe 2 months ago, and they will just return in February now because some issues with the Boeing return system, let's say like that. And they mentioned like people started to look at the face of the astronaut because she started to lose weight and so on, and people were thinking, oh, it's the mental well-being, she's not feeling well. But at the end, one NASA specialist, he shared that the amount of calories that an astronaut needs to take in microgravity is around 4 kilocalories, 4,000 kilocalories actually. So we need like way less if we're like on diet. We need to eat less, but the astronaut needs to eat this amount because they are not like they're not feeling the weight of their body. So the muscles and all of these, like this, the food will impact directly on this.
Okay, so astronauts need to eat more, so there's even more pressure to grow vegetables in our space environments. Okay.
Yes.
So we've had a couple questions about, will this webinar be available to watch again? Yes, it will be available on the Agritecture YouTube channel. So we will let folks know when that'll be available, but probably in the next couple days. We also want to know how old our audience is. So Nico, can you put up a poll really quickly about the what's your age? So we'll leave that up for about a minute, just so we understand a little bit more about who exactly our audience is. All right, can you close that poll, Nico, and see what our results look like?
Oh.
Okay, so the biggest group is 20 to 35, very few under 20. Okay, so we got to, I think we need to market our webinars on TikTok maybe, and we'll get it. Okay, so mostly 20 to 50 plus. Okay, thank you very much. There was a question about light on Mars. If we're building greenhouses on Mars, I mean, not under in the tunnels that you mentioned, but can we use the light is there enough light available on Mars so that we could just use natural light, or do we need to use some sort of supplemental lighting if we want to produce crops on Mars?
Correct. We have to use supplemental lighting because Mars is twice as far away from the sun as Earth is, it gets 50% less radiation from the sun. So that wouldn't be enough for photosynthesis, or you would be, but not for an optimal photosynthesis. So we do have to use artificial light on Mars because of the lower sun radiation. But on the moon, it's a different reason why we need to use artificial light. On the moon, we have a photo period we have a period of light and dark of 2 weeks light and 2 weeks dark. So
wow.
plants wouldn't be able to survive for 2 weeks in the dark. So we would need to have supplemental artificial lighting there anyway.
So it's 2 weeks of like nonstop
2 weeks of
light,
day,
and
yeah.
then
2 weeks of night
oh wow, interesting.
on the moon.
Complement on it, there is also the idea of the phototropism. So since the plants are in a microgravity, low gravity environment, let's say like that, lower than Earth, so we need to have like the root orientation growth and also the canopy orientation growth. So as we do not have the gravitropism, which is the gravity pushing the roots down, we need to make a way for the plants to orientate the growth. And as we know, with phototropism, the plants, if they have light, they can like orientate their growth like in a more effective manner. So we do not want our plants to grow randomly around the space environment.
Okay, awesome. So on just to put it in like terms of CEA, on the Mars environment, there's light, but the PPFD would be really low, essentially. Does that, okay. We had a question about CRISPR. Let's see, congrats for the brilliant presentation. What do you think about using CRISPR genome editing for crop resilience in these extreme environments. Is there any gene editing that's happening or CRISPR editing that's happening for trials for space environment?
Davi, you want to take it or?
Go for it. Go for it. You are
Yes, CRISPR is an option to use. I actually don't know of an experiment related to space agriculture that has used CRISPR to gene edit. But in the space farming network, we want to use radiation to induce beneficial mutations on the plants. So that's the way that it's kind of similar. We're still gene editing, but we're going to do a random mutation to see and then select for the cultivars that show the best resilience, the most optimal yield, etc.
Okay, thank you. Nico, can you put up our last poll asking people about what they would like to see or what they would like to learn about in future space farming webinars? So this is just to help us get feedback from our audience about ideas for potential guests in the future, or just something specific that you would like to learn. And
David,
maybe
while you answer that, can I answer one of the questions here in the chat?
yes, please.
Because I saw that this Cosimo, he asked in the Q&A, he asked in the chat again, and it's an interesting question. What are the best hydroponic systems for space farming and which have been tested so far? That is an excellent question because there are so many types of hydroponic systems. There are over 7 types. And for space, it's so far the one that has been giving the best results is the wick system. So that's a wick system with substrate. So what they do is, because in space, because of how microgravity works and how water works in microgravity, it's very difficult to water the roots homogeneously. So having a substrate there means that you can water the substrate, and the substrate has this like capillary action that it's called. So you can diffuse the water homogeneously throughout the whole the whole cultivar pillow there, the bag where we cultivate the plants in, and then all the roots can access the same amount of water and nutrients. So wick with substrate is the way to go so far. But for example, X roots that Davi showed is a system that uses aeroponics. And it's a very, very pioneering system. Actually, I think, if I'm not mistaken, they're the first in the world to do so. And because it's aerospace, it's actually, some of it is even confidential. We can't even access the whole of their research because it's a private company and it's not NASA. But it seems like that's also a way to go. If they can make it work, then it can work, aeroponics in space as well.
What is you mentioned that the substrate is in a bag.
Mm-hmm.
What is the actual substrate that they're using?
It can be several things. The Chinese use actual, like, just soil, sterilized soil. For veggie and for APH, they use acrylate and vermiculite, which are clay-like substances. So they're very porous. So they have a very good capillary action. I think Davi wants to compliment something. It's going like this.
Sorry, I was checking here in the chat like the questions. I missed your regarding what, Rebecca? Sorry.
Regarding the substrate of the hydroponics, I'm saying that it's usually a clay-like material, but it can also be hydrogel, actually. That's also a thing that we're also looking into using. I'm not sure if they have tested it in space, but it is a substrate that is used on Earth. And hydrogel actually has some really interesting properties that it can also recycle or filter the perchlorate on Mars. And perchlorate on Mars, regolith, is a type of salt that is very toxic. And using the hydrogel from the trip to Mars to recycle and filter the perchlorate when we arrive on Mars, that's a very clever, sustainable way of using your substrate.
Yeah, I was about to compliment like this, like they utilize some inorganic substrates basically, just like to have the root fixation and promote aeration. It's basically that. Like this is the main aim of like most of the systems because you are using a fertigation type of system. So you are providing the nutrients like via throughout the water, not throughout the substrate itself. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Davi, can you advance to the slide about the space farming course?
Sure. Do you want to go for it or next one?
Well, just tell our audience about Agritecture. We are the hosts or the co-hosts of this series, and we help folks get started in CEA here on Earth. We do not. If you need space consulting, you'll talk to Davi or Rebecca. But for here on Earth, Agritecture works in all types of controlled environment ag. So if you need our services, please feel free to reach out. Next slide. And also want to tell you about the Space Farming 101 course. If you want to learn more, Davi has created it's like a 5-hour course, which is hosted on Agritecture Designer, can be accessed through our website. So if folks are interested in learning more, taking a deep dive on this topic, please check out the Space Farming, Space Farming 101 course. And then Davi, I think you had something to share about a certificate for folks.
Yes, sure. As part of your commitment to stay until here, learning more about space farming with Rebecca, with me, we decided to also provide you in return a certificate of participation just to recognize and also to, let's say, to validate your time here with us. So as you can see in the QR code, let me send also the link on the chat. We have this form basically like to get your like the information to put on the certificate and also to get more of your feedback about this first webinar, the SpaceAG Conversations webinar. Well, to make this happen, to make this form happen, we wanted to ask Rebecca to tell us a keyword because the participants to complete the form, you need to add this keyword that Rebecca is sharing, and feel free, Rebecca. So pay attention to her right now.
Can it be 2 words?
Yeah, go for it.
The keyword is Martian tomatoes.
Good, good. To
I'm
have
gonna
some
write it in the chat.
tomato paste in space.
Martian tomatoes with a British spelling.
Yeah, okay. So add this keyword in your form, and we'll be reaching you very soon with the certificate of participation. And also we'll be providing a discount code for the SF101 in case you are interested to learn more about the topics that we discussed here now. So thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate that we stayed here with us until now. And I'm very thankful for Rebecca for accepting this invitation, the Agritecture team to make this happen, and I'm really looking forward to see you in the upcoming webinars regarding space farming. So I'll let David to lead the end of to conclude the webinar, and also to Rebecca if she wants to give some final words. Thank you.
All good on my side. Thank you very much for having me. Somebody asked to repeat the keyword. The keyword is Martian tomatoes. It's on the chat as well. Thank you very much, guys, for having me. It was a pleasure to be here with you.
Amazing. Thank you to both of our guests. And like I said before, check out the Space Farming 101 course on the Agritecture website. If you guys have additional questions for our experts, you can reach out to them on Instagram. And this, just to repeat, this is the first of our new SpaceAG series. So we'll have at least 7 more events coming up over the next 10 to 12 months. And we hope you will join us for those future webinars. So thanks again to everyone. Nico, thank you for hosting, helping us with the back end stuff. And thanks everyone for joining us. Have a wonderful day and see you at our next webinar.